I get to call this meeting to order at 1:30 of the Assets and Infrastructure Standing Policy Committee. It is December 4th today. We'll proceed with a roll call. I will proceed with Councillor Bieber. Here. Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Doria.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Excellent. We have 4 members of the committee here. We have quorum. We also have with us Councillor Croson in the room, as well as Councillor Dodick, Schmidt-Rempel, and Parker online. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I will now proceed on to the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage and beliefs in relation to the land. The City of Lethbridge offers respect to the Métis and all who have lived on this land and made Lethbridge their home. I am obviously not one of the elected officials, but I will now conduct the election for the chair and vice chair. I'm calling for nominations for the position of chair. Are there any nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Bieber?
I would like to nominate Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Campbell, you've been nominated. Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? One last time, any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll close the nominations. Councillor Campbell, you are duly elected or acclaimed as chair of this SPC. You can join the seat to my left. Would you like to conduct the vice chair, or do you want me to proceed? Proceed? Okay. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chair? Councillor Wolf.
Green. Oh, there. I would like to nominate Rufa Doria.
Councillor Doria, you have been nominated for the position of vice chair. Do you accept?
I accept.
Excellent. Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? One last time, any other nominations? Seeing none, Councillor Doria, you've been acclaimed vice chair of the Assets and Infrastructure SPC. Congratulations. I will now turn the chair over to you, Councillor Campbell, chair of this SPC.
Wonderful. And welcome. I guess we'll go right to the adoption of the agenda, which is right here. This comes from Councillor Wolf. Be it resolved that the December 4th, 2025 agenda of the Assets and Infrastructure Standing Policy Committee meeting be adopted as presented. Councillor Wolf.
Are there any additions or anything to know about?
There are no additions or changes to the agenda.
Okay, we'll call the question, please.
Question's been called. All in favor? That passes unanimously. We'll do the consent agenda from Councillor Doria. Be it resolved that the Assets and Infrastructure Standing Policy Committee, 1, approve the minutes of the Assets and Infrastructure Standing Policy Committee held on September 4th, 2025, and authorize the chair and city clerk designate to sign the same. And 2, receive for information the status of directed resolutions for December 4th, 2025. Councillor Doria.
I just want to know if are there any additions or any comments on this consented agenda?
There is none.
Okay, I'll call to question.
Question's been called. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Moving along. Okay. This will be, this is number 7. I'll read the resolution first, or do it?
It is a submission?
Yeah.
So yes, you can read it.
I'll read the resolution first, and I understand Ms. Gutzel is here if we need to ask some questions, and I think we will. Be it resolved that the Assets and Infrastructure Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council, 1, provide first reading to Bylaw 6508 on December the 16th, 2025, and 2, provide second reading to Bylaw 6508 on December 16th, 2025, and 3, provide consent in accordance with Section 187(4) of the Municipal Government Act to authorize a third and final reading to occur at the December 16th, 2025 meeting of City Council, and 4, provide third and final reading to Bylaw 6508 on December 16th, 2025. So Ms. Gutzel, could you step forward here. I think we reread it in the package, but if we can get kind of the overall explanation as to why we're here and the genesis of why we're doing this.
Sure. I did have a little
She's a
presentation.
funny one. Sorry.
I did have a little presentation if we wanted to go through that.
Do we want to have
Or
a?
can
Yeah,
I just,
we'd like to see that. Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
it's pretty little.
Okay. Sure.
All right, so like Chair said, I'm here today as the Chair of the Municipal Naming Committee to present this matter. So the matter before you is to consider repealing and replacing bylaw 6049, municipal naming and addressing bylaw. So updating this bylaw came about when City Council received a request to rename the Nika Yuko Japanese Garden Visitor Center and Pavilion. The discussion around this request resulted in Council issuing a directed resolution to review the naming process, specifically in relationship to municipal buildings. As per Council's direction to administration, the Municipal Names Committee has been working on a naming policy as well as an administrative procedure for the past 2 years in conjunction with the bylaw update. The proposed changes to the bylaw are summarized on this slide. The bylaw updates have been reviewed by the Municipal Names Committee as well as the Solicitor's Office and the Executive Leadership Team. Our conclusion and recommendation to Assets and Infrastructure SBC is on the slide above. So thank you, and I will answer any questions you may have.
So going back, if I may, just because there was the question about renaming the Bunka Center at the Japanese Gardens. What is the issue with saying, okay, this is a person who had long established relationship with the gardens, and the society really wanted to honor him? What was the issue there?
I think the idea was that we didn't have a consistent kind of guideline for naming and renaming, and that the current Municipal Names Committee, really our purview was mostly for roads and parks. And so in looking at the council resolution and the bylaw, we really wanted to try and kind of make things a lot clearer across the board and see if there was process changes that made sense.
And if I can just, if we can just take, for example, the Japanese Gardens. So they came, now that we're gonna, if we pass this next bylaw, what's their process? What happens with them?
So once, should council approve the new bylaw, administration policy and procedure can be put into place, and the naming and any naming and renaming requests, such as the one for the Nika Yuko Japanese Garden, will be addressed through the new process.
And what are some of the benchmarks or some of the protocols of yes or no for something? Will that be explained in the bylaw?
No, that's more in the policy and procedure, the administrative work. So the bylaw is just high level in terms of what, like council's responsibility, the city manager's responsibility, that kind of thing. So the policies and procedures are more set in. And then we have some processes too that I think will be looked at once the new committee is formed.
Okay. Questions from my colleagues? First off, Councillor Crowson.
As I'm a visitor, why don't you go to your committee members first, and I'll ask at the end.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, Ms.
We're all
Gutz-
here.
Thank you. Ms. Gutzel, it is not common to request 3 readings at one meeting. Can you tell me why you are asking for all of that on the 16th, for all 3 to occur at one time?
I might direct that
Okay.
to the
legal, what?
solicitor, to legal, yeah.
I believe it's because you want to get your committee going, but why all at one time?
I don't have a particular reason as to why all 3 at once, other than this has been on the status of directed resolutions, I understand, for quite some time, and there is a desire to implement it and get going on it. And I know that from administration, we do see a lot of benefit in how the new setup would occur. One of the things that the bylaw would establish is the previous bylaw was quite prescriptive in who was doing what role on the admin side for the naming committee. And I think there was some friction or some desire to get there weren't always the right people with the information on that committee, whereas the new structure will allow for much more flexibility. So if a particular Japanese garden comes in, well, let's get someone with historical background and knowledge of the Japanese history in Lethbridge. So it offers a lot of flexibility, and I think it will be a process improvement.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is, most of the naming will come from the committee, goes through the city manager, it's done. But council will have the ability to override and also to take requests from the public for commemorative ones. So that is council's role, correct, on those two specifically, if there is a request comes forward. Will your team be developing the process with the city clerk's department, et cetera, for how somebody in the community would bring forward a request to council?
Yeah, so that's the idea. Currently, the Municipal Names Committee mostly focuses on, like I said, streets and parks. So that's been our focus, and it's formed from like infrastructure folks, and we've got like fire and police on there as well. So it's that kind of focus, right? It's that sort of directional focus. It's making sure, you know, the fire truck can get there. And we don't necessarily feel like we have the expertise in some of these other areas. So the idea was that there would be an overarching committee formed that would be made up of members from ELT and general managers. And then there would be subcommittees below that. So right now, what we had envisioned was 4 subcommittees. So a subcommittee that was for streets and parks, so that would be the current one. One for buildings, one for commemorative naming, and one for Indigenous naming. And then those different groups would be staffed by people in the organization that have that specific expertise that we just didn't feel that we had. And so things like renaming a building at the Japanese Gardens felt a little outside of our skill set, and we didn't want to make the wrong decision.
I have sat on several naming for school committees for the school board, and they will often bring in members of the public, and then of course for them it's a different route. The school board has final say because they don't name as much stuff as we definitely do. So is there an opportunity sometimes to go outside city staff for specific expertise?
I definitely think that could be considered when those groups are formed, and they could decide where best that knowledge is housed, and it may not be within our organization.
Right. And one final question, if I may, this one is to Mr. Sanchez. It's a little bit off, but in here you have how big the signs need to be minimum on buildings and stuff like that. And I know I mentioned to you, Mr. Sanchez, I had asked during the election and haven't had a chance to ask it in any format. There is a concern from some people I spoke with about the street signs. One, they're way too small as you get older, and I'm feeling that more and more myself. And 2, could the city pick a location on the signs, either have them in the middle, on the left, on the right, consistency? And I know you and I talked about that, but is there, this is a policy about buildings, but is there any policy about how we sign the streets? Not the names, but where that sign goes?
Thank you for the question. So what we are trying to do moving forward is basically historically the signs have been located on the traffic pole or the street lights, depending on the availability of a space. So that's why sometimes they are not consistent where they are. But we have been working with the transportation group to ensure that as we move forward and we do life cycle of these signs, we're gonna try to, number one is to create a bigger sign. You can see that example in downtown. Sometimes we have the old name plus the new name and they're big. And when you go to neighborhoods, then they're totally different, or in the warehouse district is totally different as well. So short answer, yes, we're gonna be working on how we can life cycle and replace them. The only limitation is that we're gonna try to work with what we have today, and the spaces might not always fit, but the guideline will be created.
Okay, perfect. So doing it in a way that respects the budget, but moving towards it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't here for the previous debates on this resolution, which is probably quite far along now. So you're saying we're going to go from 1 committee to 4 committees?
Yes, mostly just because, like, even our group doesn't meet very often.
Sure.
Our committee doesn't, like, naming a new neighborhood doesn't come up very often. So I don't think it would be a particularly onerous burden on staff. But yeah, we just felt like that expertise for even commemorative naming, right? Like when I did some research into writing these guidelines, there's a whole bunch of different suggestions out there. And I think that there's people that are probably better fit to make those decisions or make those rulings in terms of what makes you worthy of being named.
Sure. And so going forward, will the naming process be more expedited and simple under this new regime? Like, is it going to take 2 years to rename a Bunka Center, or is it going to be faster?
No, I'd hope that it would be faster, just because it would be going to the specific kind of group that had that expertise.
Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on that answer, I mean, part of the issue before is that I think Mrs. Gutzel explained there was not a common framework to deal with anything that was not a road or a park. So the work that the staff is doing is to create a committee and subcommittees under that admin committee. So it's one committee and there will be 4 subgroups, most likely. That's what is the plan. And those 4 groups are gonna try to follow the internal, the procedure that is going to be created, and is going to try to come up with the decisions as soon as possible, and is going to be overseen under the city manager or designate in this case.
Councillor Doria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, again, I have to reiterate the question of Councillor Belinda, that is it normal to have a request for 3 readings in one day? I just think that maybe there is a rush, or is there a rush for this to be taken care of? That's my first question. And if I may continue for my second question, is when you explain in your presentation, one of the reasons why we need to repeal the previous bylaw is because we want to remove the reference of land coordinators. And then it was really defined what are the duties and responsibilities of these land coordinators in this the bylaw 6049. And please help me understand, because I cannot see any stipulations in the new bylaws as to like whether you have to create in lieu of the land coordinators with the committees that you said, but there is no direction here, rather than in telling that the city manager has the authority to do that. So is there a need to stipulate that you need to create committees to move forward for the namings of buildings? That's my question.
Sure. So for the first question, in terms of the timing, I think we understood that this process was sort of the public hearing part of it. Like if you do a rezoning, they do the first reading, and then a month later they have a public hearing, and then second and third reading. And since we didn't have that component part of this bylaw, we thought, okay, well, the SPC is the opportunity for the public to come and speak, and then if nobody does, or if there are people in the audience that want to speak, then we would have that public hearing part, and then the voting could happen at the next council meeting. So that was sort of why we thought the 3 together made sense. And sorry, your second part was?
About the land.
Oh yeah, the land coordinators.
Yeah.
So what we were finding was that because there were, like the position was listed within the old bylaw, it made it really confusing if, like, for example, Maureen, what used to be the manager of something, and now she's the general manager, and that change then needed to be updated in the bylaw, and it would have to come to you. Whereas if we have the city manager, which is what a lot of the bylaws have, then he has the authority to say, okay, well, that position has essentially stayed the same, and that will continue to have this role in the process. So it was more, it just took those little administrative things that often crop up that make the bylaw less clear, and it just took them out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bieber.
You know, Ryan Wolf, he actually stole my question because when I saw the idea of 4 subcommittees, I go, well, it's not really streamlining things, then I could increase the process. But I've got in front of me the document that talks about the duties of the Municipal Names Committee. And I'm wondering, when this work is done, is that going to provide more options for names, more appropriate names? I'm just kind of trying to get a handle on the whole purpose of doing all this work.
So that's definitely how I saw it, was that I'm an engineer who's now in the planning department, and research is not my forte. So when you look at commemorative naming, for example, researching somebody's history and understanding, you know, how we make sure that that person is worthy of having their name on one of our buildings, that is not an area of expertise that I have. And so for me, I thought there's probably people in the organization that have that expertise. So it would make sense to task them with commemorative naming. Same with Indigenous naming. I do not have that expertise. You know, there's been issues that have come with, you know, how do you spell Micmac? And I don't have that expertise. And I don't want to do it incorrectly or insensitively. And so for me, there are people in our organization, again, that have that experience. So that was the idea behind creating subcommittees with people that have that expertise, to make sure that we're naming and renaming in a thoughtful way.
I will step out of the queue.
Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Ms. Getzel, for bringing this forward and speaking to us on this. You talked about policy and process will be put in place after the bylaw is improved. Do we have a timeline on what that might look like?
They are drafted. I'm not that familiar with. I'll let Maureen answer that.
So thank you for the question, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. One of the reasons why the bylaw took a little bit longer to come to council was because we wanted to ensure the policy, procedure, and bylaw were all in alignment. So we are ready to implement those in the new year.
Okay, and will those come to council for review?
I don't believe administrative policies or procedures come to council. No, that's why they're administrative.
Okay, well, and I just asked because it seems like some of the questions we're having today are because of the gaps that we're seeing in that we don't understand what the policy and processes are. So some of the questions I had, we talked a little bit about how the Municipal Names Committee was going to be done. But again, another question that I had was what level of public engagement is administration envisioning around naming? But that should be part of the policy and not necessarily part of the bylaw.
That's correct.
Right. So that's where some of my questions come in the form of the gaps that I'm not seeing in the bylaw, because I don't have the policy or processes to help me understand how this is a complete package, if that makes sense.
So I think as Ms. Gutzel spoke to the subcommittees, there is the opportunity as we form the subcommittees to look at potential avenues for perhaps public members or some kind of engagement. Obviously, if we're naming streets and roads, we're not asking for public engagement in that aspect. Some of those other subgroups, like for assets such as buildings or for our Indigenous component and also commemorative, there may be opportunity there as we form those subgroups. And again, all of this rests under ELT, and so we'll be ensured that our senior leaders in the corporation are also in alignment and on side with whatever the subcommittees do.
Yeah, no, and I certainly appreciate that. I just think that giving council the basic knowledge and understanding of what the policy and processes look like so that we don't feel like there are gaps in a bylaw that we're about to approve would certainly be helpful. Moving on from that though, have we validated this bylaw against Alberta 911 addressing requirements and emergency response practices? So what process, dispatch services, Canada Post, those sorts of things are all updated promptly should something go through?
Yes, those things have not changed. There is an initiative currently with changing the 911 system in Canada to be more of a latitude, longitude. We're working through that process with information technology, And so there's nothing in this bylaw that precludes any of that work happening. And other than ensuring that municipal addresses appear on front and back of building to assist with our first response, that's really the only thing, and that was in the bylaw, the current bylaw and in the proposed bylaw, so there aren't any changes there.
Okay. And then what is the process, or what happens when a resident or business opposes the naming or addressing change? What's their formal appeal process or review mechanism on that?
So we haven't had very many instances where we have renamed a street or an address. So whenever we have an application come forward, so for instance, Métis Trail, we chose a street, like Benton Drive it was called, that had no addresses on it. We understand the consternation to a business and to a resident when their address or street name would change. There are a lot of onerous things for them in terms of identification and banking and everything that they then have to update. So we undertake that very infrequently for changing somebody's address or street name. We understand what those implications could be. The only reason we would do that is perhaps for fire response. If it made more sense from a 911 perspective, then perhaps we would look at that. Currently, we don't have an appeal mechanism for that. This is something that is not in the MGA or anything like that. I'm not sure perhaps if Legal Services wants to weigh in, but there is no appeal mechanism. But as I've said, it's incredibly infrequent that we would do that, understanding how onerous it is.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, and I can advise that the bylaw does allow for names to be changed, street names to be changed in particular by council resolution. So if there's an initial street name, and let's say there aren't any addresses on it yet, so it's not onerous and that's not a consideration, someone doesn't like it, they could always make the appeal to council.
Okay, so that would be the suggested appeal mechanism then?
Yes, that would be the only way for a street name to be changed.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So maybe, sorry to harp on this, but subcommittee, the word subcommittee freaks me out. So barring a new development where you folks are going and naming 50 streets, how often a year do we name a building? How often a year are we, like, how frequent? We seem this, you know, we're getting a little bit, these questions about just finally passing this bylaw, like, let's get it passed. I can't imagine this is, you're naming 20 buildings a year. How many buildings are you naming in a year?
No, currently our committee doesn't name buildings.
Well,
So, yeah.
okay.
So in the case, so you're right, like when they built the Bunka Center, the Garden Society had an idea for what they wanted to name it. And so that was part of the construction. And that's what we're suggesting, is that when a new building, a new city building is built, then the naming would be part of that. And we've also talked about, because we have, in the last few years, there's been the corporate sponsorship part of it. And so we've talked about having kind of an administrative name. So that would be a name that would live with the building for its entirety. And that name would not change. And then either there would be an opportunity for a sponsorship, or there would be sort of a public-facing name that could be changed. So that's what we're envisioning for buildings. But again, that's why there's a subcommittee that would have the expertise from probably facilities to talk about what makes sense for the sort of administrative building name, and then give the opportunity to have a public name if we so choose. And that would happen, I would assume, at the capital improvement process. Like, you would say, okay, we're going to build this, what are we going to name this?
Mr. Sanchez.
Just to add a little bit more to, and to clarify, when there is most of the buildings that we're talking here are public buildings, buildings that are owned by the city for the most part. So that will be an arena, that will be a park, or any other facility that has a building on it. I think Mrs. Gutzel already covered when it's a naming or a sponsorship, which is a different venue as well. But for the most part, it's not frequent, it's not common that this is happening. Back to your original question, this is not that we're naming I'm gonna say 5 facilities as really not common. So it's when it happens, we have the steps in place to do that.
Like, are there people waiting on this bylaw so we can finally allow a name? And they've been waiting for how long? Good grief. Okay, let's do her.
I just wanted to just kind of tie up. There is the naming of like the Nikayuko, but there's also the sponsorship part of it. Is there an active group seeking sponsorships, because that was kind of an initiative? You know, we want to rename the NMAC Center to gain dollars. We want to name trails, and that sponsorship goes into a fund or whatever. What kind of where are we with that? And is this?
Yeah, I would have to defer that question. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, Carly, Ms. Kleisinger.
So the sponsorship position, the corporate sponsor position that council approved is with Entertainment and Event Services, and so he works for the visitlethbridge.com arena, and that is separate outside of that. So a name sponsorship of a building would be something, so what Ms. Gutzel was saying is Crossings Leisure Complex, as an example, is the formal name of the leisure center on the west side. But at any given time, we might get a name sponsorship that we get a dollar value out of that turns that name into Cavendish Farm Center. So that's where it sits right now. That's the difference between the name sponsorship and the name of the building, which is the formal name is Crossings Leisure Complex. So that's where it gets muddy. So in terms of our sponsorship, we do have a person in that position that's actively looking for those different name sponsorships.
So will this bylaw encompass that, or is this going to be totally separate?
Yeah, and actually it was the culmination of this position and the naming of the new buildings and then the naming committee that made this very muddy. And so what they're seeking to do is separate those back out so that all the different naming, the name sponsorship is all been cleared up, so we're not constantly wondering whose job is it to do this naming. So this should make it all more clear.
Great. You answered my question. Oh, okay. Oh, you have a question. You have an answer. You have a statement. Yeah. Okay.
Just to add on what Ms. Kleisinger said, the way the bylaw has been set up is that it will work in tandem and now fits within the sponsorship guidelines policy that we have. And there was a bit of friction before, and now they're in alignment and they will work together.
Okay. Great. Do I have any other questions from my colleagues here or online? Thank you very much for your input. Thank you. We'll turn it over to Councillor Bieber on the resolution. Want to open?
I would just call for the vote unless there's any more debate on the matter.
Anybody else have anything to say? No, I think this makes it. I think back to when the Japanese Gardens wanted to honor someone who has been a real major part of the Japanese Gardens by giving a name, and it got convoluted there. So having this policy in place will really help with that process in a good way. So unless there's no other debate, question has been called. Question has been called. All in favor? That is unanimous. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.